There's a Porsche in your neighbor's driveway. Silver, low, 2 seats, top down. And your first thought was probably not, wow, a Boxster. It was something closer to, oh, he couldn't afford the 911. That thought? That single, automatic, completely unfair assumption? That's exactly what we need to talk about. Because the Porsche Boxster has been carrying that reputation since 1996, and it has never quite shaken it. Not because the car deserved the reputation, but because people are strange. Car culture is ruthless, and the word entry level has a way of sticking to things like a bad nickname from middle school. You can win every comparison test, earn every 5-star review, and still walk into a room where someone's already made up their mind about you. The Boxster started at around $40,000 when it launched. That was real money in the late 90s. Not I'm being responsible money. I made a decision my accountant will question money. And yet, from the very beginning, the conversation around the car was shaped by what it wasn't. It wasn't the 911. It didn't have a rear engine. It didn't have 2 rear seats, not that anyone used those anyway. It was, and this phrase followed the car for decades, the poor man's Porsche. Which is a sentence that makes absolutely no sense when you say it out loud, but there it is. Here's something worth keeping in mind for later. The people who actually drove both cars back to back on a real road often came away with a very different opinion than the people who ranked them from a parking lot. We'll get back to that. Now, who actually buys a Boxster? The honest answer is a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, but a few patterns repeat themselves with enough consistency that you start to notice them. And once you see these patterns, you can't really unsee them. There's the guy who cross-shopped the 911 seriously. He built the configurator multiple times. He knows the option codes. He sat with the number for weeks. And then, somewhere in that process, something shifted. Maybe it was the price difference. A well-spec'd Boxster S versus an entry 911 Carrera could be a gap of $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 depending on the year. Maybe it was the honest realization that he lives 45 minutes from the nearest good road and the Boxster would be faster on that road anyway. He tells himself, and he's not entirely wrong, that he made the smart choice. The Boxster's mid-engine layout gives it better natural balance than the 911's rear-engine design. Porsche's own test drivers have acknowledged this. He knows this. He mentions it more than occasionally. Then there's the used market buyer. And this one is a specific kind of person. He spent somewhere between 2 and 5 months on forums before touching a single car. He knows about the IMS bearing issue on the 986 generation cars, the intermediate shaft bearing that could fail catastrophically on early flat-six engines if it wasn't addressed. He knows which production years are affected. He knows which engines got the updated bearing. He can explain the difference between the single-row and dual-row bearing in more detail than most mechanics. He bought a 987 with documented service history, a ceramic coating, and a pre-purchase inspection from a Porsche specialist. He paid $28,000, and he will tell you, without a trace of irony, that it was the most rational automotive decision of his adult life. He's probably right. And somewhere deep down, he also knows that $28,000 for a Porsche that drives like this is the kind of deal that keeps you up at night in the best possible way. Both of these people have something in common. They are slightly, gently, persistently defensive about their car, not in an aggressive way. More like a person who knows a secret and has learned that sharing it rarely goes the way you'd hope. There's also the convertible calculation. This one is interesting because it involves a kind of psychological negotiation that almost no one admits to. The Boxster is a roadster. That's the whole point. And for a certain segment of buyers, typically somewhere in the 45 to 60 range, the open-top element isn't just a preference. It's a statement. Whether that statement is, I have arrived somewhere in my life where I can own this car, or I am refusing to let time pass without doing something about it, is a distinction that probably doesn't need to be pressed too hard. The point is, the drop top isn't incidental. It's doing real psychological work. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. Every car purchase is doing some kind of psychological work. The Boxster buyer is just slightly more aware of it than most. He chose this particular vehicle, in this particular body style, at this particular moment in his life. That's not an accident. That's a decision with layers. What surprises people outside the Boxster world, anyway, is how often genuine driving enthusiasm shows up in this ownership group. Not performance posturing, actual, specific love of driving. Boxster owners show up disproportionately in driving school enrollment, in track day participation, in amateur motorsport. The car invites that. The mid-engine balance, the flat six sound, the steering that still communicated something back to your hands long after many cars had gone numb, these aren't marketing claims. They're reasons people with real driving knowledge keep coming back to this platform. It turns out that when you build a car with the engine sitting right behind your shoulders and put real effort into the chassis, drivers notice. Who knew? There was a period roughly spanning the first decade of the 2000s when serious driving journalists started saying out loud what enthusiasts had quietly known for years, that the Boxster might actually be the better driver's car in the Porsche lineup, full stop. Not better in a straight line, not better on paper. Better in the way a car feels when a road gets interesting and you start asking more of it. The 981 generation, which ran from 2012 to 2016, brought the GTS variant. 330 horsepower, sport chassis, Alcantara interior. That car was not an apology for anything. It was a statement made quietly, without a press release, for the people paying attention, and yet, the parking lot hierarchy remained. At a Porsche Club event, a 911 owner and a Boxster owner will have a perfectly civil conversation. Warm, even. But there is a current running underneath it. Both parties feel it. Neither one will name it directly. The 911 owner has a slight gravitational authority that doesn't require words. The Boxster owner has a smile that means something. And he knows it means something. And part of him wishes it didn't have to. This is, when you think about it, a fairly unusual psychological position to be in. You own a car that is genuinely excellent, not as a consolation prize, but on its own terms. You know this. You've felt it. And yet you spend a non-trivial portion of your ownership experience managing other people's incorrect assumptions about what your car represents about you. That's a strange tax to pay on an otherwise excellent purchase. Most luxury car owners get to enjoy unambiguous social credit. The Boxster owner gets a more complicated transaction. What's remarkable is how Boxster owners seem to develop a particular kind of confidence through this process. Not arrogance, something quieter. The person who has driven a 987 Boxster S on a proper mountain road and then listened to someone in a parking lot explain that it's basically a poorer man's 911, that person develops a very specific relationship with external validation. Specifically, they stop needing it quite so much. Or they learn to wear the underestimation like a comfortable jacket. It becomes, over time, almost part of the appeal. You own a car that the uninformed dismiss and the informed respect. That's a reasonably good place to be. Better in some ways than owning the car everyone already agrees is great. There's a version of the Porsche brand story that goes like this. The 911 is the icon. The Cayenne pays for everything, and the Boxster is the car Porsche had to make because not everyone can afford the real thing. That version of the story is still out there. It still circulates at dinner tables and in comment sections. And if you ask a Boxster owner about it carefully, in the right setting, you'll often get a pause before the answer. Not because they're hurt, because they've heard it so many times they've developed a small, practiced response, and they're deciding which version to use on you. The patient version, the technical version, or the one where they just smile and say nothing, which is usually the most effective. The truth, which Boxster owners carry around like a card they don't always feel like playing, is that this car has been one of the most rewarding sports cars available at any price for most of its existence. It won comparison tests. It defined what a modern roadster could be. It made people who drove it feel something that plenty of more expensive cars never managed. The 982 generation, the current one, badged as the 718, moved to a turbocharged four-cylinder and took some heat for it. Purists mourned the flat six. But even then, the fundamental thing the car does, put a driver in the middle of the machine and let physics work naturally, didn't change. The soul remained, even if the soundtrack shifted. And the person who bought one, whether they were being rational or nostalgic or quietly rebellious against the 911 worship, usually figured that out pretty quickly, sometimes before the first tank of gas was finished. Sometimes on the first real road, with the top down, doing something in third gear that reminded them exactly why they liked cars in the first place. That moment tends to settle the internal debate fairly decisively. In a Porsche parking lot, the Boxster is still the one that gets glanced at second. And its owner knows that. He's counted on it, actually. He's made a certain peace with the hierarchy, and somewhere along the way he stopped minding. Or maybe stopped pretending to stop minding, which is close enough. Because the people who look twice are usually the ones who know what they're looking at. And quietly, without making too much of it, that's exactly the kind of recognition he was after all along. Not the loudest car in the lot, just the right one.